Hello, I'm Nava Milliken. I'm the Artistic Director for the Center for Art in Wood. And with me today are four illustrious artists, educators, thinkers, writers, educators, mentors, and leaders in the field of contemporary wood turning in the United States. And I'm just so honored to have them with me tonight. This is going to be a fantastic evening. And I also see some luminaries here in the crowd too. So that's just really an enormous honor. So first of all, just to get that out of the way and to say that because of this tonight, I'm a little nervous. So I'm sure it'll wear off soon, but stakes are high just because of the amount of experience and brains and talent that we have with us today. So bear with me. I'm going to introduce with images for a couple of minutes. Oh, it's making me do this thing again. Okay. Great. So tonight's, we're going to talk about Women Turn the World and if you don't mind raising your hand when I call your name, just so people can associate your square with your name. Suzanne Kahn, Merryll Saylan, Betty Scarpino, and Winkle. So the main focus of tonight's discussion is a contemporary wood turning on the centenary of the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution, which lands on today. So today represents exactly to the day 100 years since the ratification of the 19th Amendment. I'm gonna back up a tiny bit in case you're not familiar with the Center for Art in Wood. The center is located in Philadelphia, but it has embraced, studied, documented, and presented work by artists all over the world. It was founded in 1986 and then instituted in 1996. It nurtures and advocates for the innovation of art in wood through collaborative residencies, exhibitions, learning and outreach, and documentation. So during the 2019-2020 year, the center has aligned its programming with the centenary of the 19th Amendment of the US Constitution. And we chose that kind of period of time to align with the date in June of 1919 and Congress's passage of the amendment to the ratification today, 100 years ago on August 18th, 1920, as I mentioned. While we celebrate the achievement of this landmark, we also know that many in the women's suffrage movement disenfranchised women of color, even while the leadership and activism of many African-American suffragists, as well as Asian American and Latin American suffragists, was critical for the passage of the law. And for many years following its passing, it actually did little to protect the access of women of color in the US political system. In recognition of this history, we are reflecting on the contributions of women to the advancement and practice of wood turning and the work that remains ahead of us as we strive to achieve equity and inclusivity among all practitioners in our field. So we're using this bracket of time to kind of reflect back and then set up a parallel discussion that relates to wood turning and how taking an assessment of the here and now, and then looking ahead and how we can build a better future for the field, if so needed. As we commemorate the landmark passing of the step forward in the country's democratic history, I'm honored tonight to be joined by the four luminaries whose names I mentioned, who represent the field of contemporary wood turning in America. I think we're gonna have a lively discussion, so hold on to your seats. Lucy Lepard said, "I do write about men now and then, but I mostly write about women because that's the work I like best. When I became a feminist, I realized that somebody had to write about all this women's art that was out there ignored, and it was going to be me." So we'll get more into what Lucy was trying to say later in the course of our discussion, but I'm using that to set up a framework. The center's permanent collection numbers more than 1,100 works. and objects. 105 of these objects were made solely by women. The first to be accessioned in 1988 was Robin Horn's Jacques Geode, which is dated 1987, and it was the 44th object to be documented into the collection. In the 30 years since this acquisition, the representation of women artists in the collection has actually grown in proportion to the increasing numbers of women artists in the field. But we do have many, many strides to take in order to advocate for equity and inclusivity in our field. So now I'm going to move on to the introductions. Alphabetically, our guest is Suzanne Kahn, who is living here and working here in Philadelphia. I'm reading, Suzanne, I'm reading from your bio. I hope you don't mind. So if you have something to add, please pipe up. So Suzanne has always been a maker of things, and her hands have always been busy, whether sewing, planting, cooking, and painting. And I think that still holds for today. Over the years, Suzanne has focused her talents increasingly on the art of wood. She studied at the Philadelphia Furniture Workshop, the Lohr School of Woodworking, and also the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship. She writes, although creativity resides in us all, harnessing the talent that it takes to release that force takes time and care from dedicated teachers. Today, I focus a major portion of my artistic practice on the art of teaching others to grow and achieve through woodworking. Turning wood on a lathe is one of the few woodworking practices that provides almost instant gratification. It is a fundamental, gateway to the wood as craft, to wood as art. The Dovetail Studio, which was founded by Suzanne in, Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 2018?
No, probably 15.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
Probably, yeah, that's fine. It's longer than that. I don't know, I've lost count.
Recently, within the last 5 years. It's filled with artists who find inspiration by engaging in collaborative workshops. Neighborhood kids are instinctively fascinated by all the tools and readily accept the challenge to express their creative voices. This modern urban studio within the Macon North building, which is in South Kensington, for those of you who are familiar with Philadelphia's neighborhoods, is a destination for people from all walks of life to explore new parts of themselves as they turn wood and carve, paint, burn, and embellish it. Dovetail Wood Arts is a space for all seeking growth and achievement through the exploration of self-expression. Suzanne takes an active role in supporting and guiding them along that journey. I will say that it's an amazingly inspirational space, and the center has been very fortunate to have collaborated with Suzanne on a project that brought Merryll to Philadelphia for an intensive workshop. So it's all these threads intertwining and bringing us together. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for being here. Next, we have Merryll Saylan. Oops, sorry about that little, now you know the accession number of T-set in the center's collection. Merryll lives and maintains a studio in Louisville, Colorado, but she's actually a Berkeley expat. She received her BA in design from UCLA and an MA in art from California State University of Northridge. Her work has been exhibited in many museums and galleries, including the Renwick Gallery and the Smithsonian Art Museums, the Museum of Art and Design in New York, and the Yale University Art Gallery in New Haven, Connecticut. Her pieces have been included in numerous shows, such as Turning Wood into Art at the Mint Museum, Turned Wood Now at Arizona State University Museum, and the opening exhibition at the Museum of Arts and Design, as well as her solo exhibition at the Center for Art and Wood in November 2018. Wow, what was This Is Your Life. A leader in the use of color and texture on wood and a valued authority in wood turning, Saylan has also written extensively on art techniques and the wood turning field, and her writings have been published in books and magazines nationally. Merrill's influence in the wood and craft communities is also felt through her teaching practice and her involvement in numerous arts organizations. She has served on the board of the Woodturning Center, before it was the Center for Art and Wood, and the American Association of Woodturners, and also as a master member in the Ballines Guild. Merrill participated in artist in residence programs throughout the United States and England, including the Griesdale Sculpture Park in Cumbria in the UK, the International Turning Exchange, the Wingate International Turning Exchange, which is organized by the Center for Art and Wood, and Anderson Ranch Arts Center in Colorado. Merrill was a visiting artist and taught at the Center for the CCA, the Center for Craft and Art in San Francisco. And in 2004, the US Department of State's Art in Embassies Program sent her to Fiji to hold a series of public lectures and workshops where her work is on display at the US Embassy. She was invited to participate in the Smithsonian Archives of American Art and recently finished working on that documentation. Congratulations, Merrill. In 2009, Merrill was AAW, the American Association of Woodturners Professional Outreach Program Merit Award winner. And thank you so much to Merrill for joining us today. It's amazing to have you here. Betty Scarpino, Betty, where are you? Say hello, is an internationally recognized contemporary artist, wood sculptor, wood turner, and woodcut printmaker, and based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Betty's contemporary wood sculptures combine fluid motion with intricate detail. Her creative energy draws people to her, and numerous awards have come her way, including the this year's Lifetime Achievement Award from the AAW?
Yes.
Is that the title of the award?
Honorary Lifetime Member.
Honorary Lifetime Member. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Betty was born in 1949 in Wenatchee, Washington, the state where I was also born. Her career began in the 70s when she began making furniture and producing purely functional pieces. She has a degree in industrial arts from the University of Missouri, where she also studied wood carving and wood sculpture. While these early years did not develop her artistic innovation, Betty mastered the techniques that now allow her to create wood sculpture, decorative art, wood turning, and woodcut prints. Her abstract woodcut sculptures and decorative art wood turnings are in the permanent collection of many major museums, including the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian Museum of Art, and the Center for Art in Wood, as you see here, the object on the left. So thank you so much, Betty, for being here today. And finally, we have Kim Winkle. Hi, Kim. Kim is a maker who creates furniture and objects using wood and paint. Her wood displays a balance of form, color, and surface pattern. She has exhibited nationally and internationally, including at SOFA Chicago, in the Why Wood exhibition in 2016, where I got to know you for the first time, I think, and at the Architectural Digest Home Show. Her work has been included in a number of publications, including Fine Woodworking, Woodworker, and Woodworker West magazines, and the Lark books, 500 Tables, 500 Chairs, Fine Woodworking Design Book 8, and many others. Kim has completed several artist residencies, including our own Wingate International Turning Exchange, the Wingate Artist Residency at the State University of New York in Purchase, Haystack, Mountain School of Crafts, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Appalachian Center for Craft. She has been awarded 4 niche awards, a State of Tennessee Individual Artist Award in 2011, and the Society of Arts and Crafts Boston John D. Minnick Furniture Fellowship in 2014, an incredible honor. And actually, they're taking submissions now for the next round. So if you're interested in that, contact us and we'll give you more information. Kim is a professor of art and a director at the School of Art, Craft, and Design at Tennessee Technological University. She holds a BFA in ceramics from the University of Oklahoma and an MFA in furniture design from the San Diego State University. Her workshop teaching experience includes Haystack, Panelland, Arrowmont, Anderson Ranch, the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, the John Campbell Folk School, and the Appalachian Center for Craft. Thank you so much for being here today, Kim. It's an honor to have all of you with us.
Thank you.
So with that, and with this very charming shot of Merrill at the lathe, when was this, Merrill? Do you remember? This?
No, I think John Levine actually. I don't know if he took that picture or my husband. I don't remember.
Okay, well, it's lovely. So I was happy.
The years run together, yeah.
So I'm going to open this discussion to first ask all of our guests on the panel, and I'll just invite you to jump in as you feel inclined, to tell everybody how you got your start in wood turning, and not only that, not only how you were initially acquainted with the process, but also what was it about wood turning that was compelling, that made you stick around with it and build your creative practice around it?
Who's starting?
You are.
You are.
Go for it, Merrill.
All right, I went back to school in my 30s, and it was, actually, I was thinking about this today. It was in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was at the height of the beginning of the feminist movement, the anti-Vietnam movement. It was, in fact, my classes at art school, I went first into design at UCLA, were based on my color theory class, was that we could make protest signs against the war. And so I did graduate there in design, wanted to go to architecture, and decided that I would take a sabbatical. I gave myself a break before going on to this advanced program. And I went to Cal State Northridge and thought I'd learn how to make a couple of pieces of furniture. And part of the program was you had to turn on a lathe. And I think partly because of my background in design, I didn't want to just turn anything. I had to do something very functional. And at the time when I took my sabbatical, I also took an Asian cooking class for 15 weeks. And so I thought I'd make a set of rice bowls, and that got me started. And I just never left that program. I stayed in that program. It was very different than UCLA in the sense that it was much more geared towards crafts, where at UCLA, even in our studio classes, we were much more interested in environmental things back then. And I think there was a book, Design for the Real World, that came out at that point. So I found this was a strange sort of dichotomy, but still I stayed in the wood program and I never left. And that became my new career.
I was working full-time. I was being trained as a computer operator, and the company I worked for wanted me to learn how to program, and I'd started learning that. Ooh. So they paid for a class at the University of Missouri in algebra. And while I was doing that class, I thought, well, I'll just see if I could take another class. And I signed up for the only class they had at night open, which was woodworking, beginning woodworking. That sounded like fun. And so it was a lab class Tuesday, Thursday nights, and I fell in love with wood, really never looked back. The lathe is the last machine I learned how to use. I wasn't necessarily enamored of it or with it. And it really wasn't until the AAW started that I could see a connection with that would open up connections to the wider world. So I became really connected with the AAW and with the wood turning field because of that.
Yeah, I think for me, before wood turning, I was very much involved with furniture making. And before that, I was a landscape design and installer. And I've always been very interested in large motor, very full body engagement with projects. And I learned wood turning for furniture parts. And I was immediately struck by the similarity with learning to sew as a young child. The idea that you would just take material and be able to have an immediate impact on its form, its shape, its outcome. And it was very meditative. And it was a way to spend time with material and think about other things at the same time. And so it went from, you know, functional objects into sculptural objects, into things that belong in the fire. But I just love it.
So I learned how to turn wood. My first wood turning class was the fall of 2002. I had just completed my MFA at San Diego State under the tutelage of Wendy Maruyama. And I went to the Appalachian Center for Craft, planning to be there for 1 year, and I'm still there, still here, which is a great place. I believe in what we do in craft education. And part of my job as a resident artist was to help facilitate our workshop program, which included wood turning. And at the time, you know, I was instructed to get out all the gouges to prepare for the workshops to come in. And I literally did not know the difference between a bowl gouge and a spindle gouge. And in graduate school, we had a nice one-way lathe that did a great job of holding like cross-cut sleds and things like that for the table saw. It just was not used because people didn't know how to use it. The only time we saw it being used was primarily when we had a guest instructor come in, like Michael Hoselick would come in and, you know, do his crazy, amazing work in the blink of an eye. And that was it, you know? And so I just wasn't familiar with it. And I also wasn't familiar with the field. So I love being a student. I love trying out new things. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie in some ways. And I'm also an opportunist. So if here's an opportunity that's right in my lap where I could learn a new technique and grow my skill set. And so one of the perks of that program was that I could sit in on a workshop if there was an opening. I just had to pay for my own materials. So my first wood turning class was actually a green bowl turning class with Clay Foster. That was in fall of 2002. The following summer, I was able to take a week-long workshop with Nick Cook, where I feel like I really learned the most regarding the fundamentals of wood turning. He stresses proper technique, understanding what you're doing. And then subsequent to that, I was able to sit in on classes. I had a class with Merryll. I made a cute little bowl that's sort of a T-bowl shape that's sort of evocative of her work. Have sat in workshops with Alster. We've had so many wonderful people come in. John Jordan, Dixie Biggs has been there. Everybody has been there. And so those experiences have been very rewarding for me. I think they're inspirational, but not expressed directly in the type of work that I'm making, but just listening to what they're saying and how they're saying it, the ideas that they're articulating about their work, both conceptually and also technically, have been really influential. And to be perfectly honest, initially, you know, I wanted to learn how to turn, but it wasn't like, you know, on my bucket list. And I think the reason why is because I was so ignorant to the, I guess, the artistic potential of the technique. You know, what I knew was a very, very limited range of the field. And I know I recently gave a presentation for the WIT group, and I told them, and I'll tell you again, that really wood turning has changed my life professionally, because it's opened up so many new opportunities for me to make. That's much more like was said a minute ago. You know, it's quick compared to furniture making. You know, it can be. Now that doesn't mean that we don't obsess, you know, ridiculously on surface and all of that stuff later, but it is a much quicker way to realize a form than utilizing traditional furniture making techniques. So it really has opened up a whole new set of opportunities for me artistically, and also it's grown my community tremendously. I've had the opportunity to engage in much more educational opportunities as a result. And it's empowering. It's really empowering to know that I can go make whatever I want to make. If I need something, I can go do it myself. So that's how I got started in wood turning, and I just owe a ton of gratitude to my teachers and also the Center for Art and Wood for making, fostering this community, fostering the community that continues to provide the education, and also to other organizations like the AAW that help create an organized structure for disseminating and sharing information.
Thank you. That's illuminating, and hearing all your experiences raises some questions as well, and we'll come back to those. But first, I just want to set, since we're here to talk about wood turning and what it means to be a woman in this field, we should probably first establish or whether or not it's even relevant or important to have this conversation. Is it important to talk about women in the field of wood turning, and why? Can't we just turn things? Should we just shut up and turn?
I was when everyone was talking, I had this question if I could ask. When I was graduating high school, you took an aptitude test. And on the aptitude test, I came out very high in mechanics, mechanical things, and aesthetics. And I remember the counselor telling my mother and me that they just don't work together. And even in those days, I wanted to go to architecture school. Well, then many, many years later, I had a group of women. I was laid up with some health issues, and I invited a group of women to my studio just to get together. Suzanne actually flew out for that. And one of the things when we all were introducing ourselves was sort of, we all had this similar thing, like we were drawn, part of our personalities were drawn to things that were always in the male domain, like the counselor telling me that mechanics and aesthetics do not work together. Mechanical things, like I like playing with the Tinker toys, but they were my brothers, kind of stuff. And so when you were all talking, I was curious. I found myself curious, that we did pick a field. Certainly when I started, it was a male domain. I even read a John Cheever story where he talked about a wood shop as being a solution to a guy's problem. He was falling in love with his babysitter, and he went to a therapist, and the therapist told him to get a hobby. And what did he get? Was a wood shop. That story has stayed with me for 30 years. But I was curious with all of you, like.
Yeah, I'm hearing that this whole engineering, science, mechanical interest and passion. And when it was for me to go to college, I thought it'd be great to be an engineer or an architect. I was just like, this is what I should do.
Right.
And everyone looked around at me like, no, I don't, like, no. And where would you go do that? Mm-hmm. And it was just, I was still pretty assertive back then, but it kind of snuffed it out a little bit. And I ended up doing those sort of things on my own time. And even though in my practice now, I don't think about, I'm a woman in this man's world.
Right.
I've gone through a lot of years. Like, I don't think about that so much anymore. But I do meet younger women who are seeing that, and they do see that. And the public believes what they see. And so it's very important to me to get out in front, showing these tools, showing me using those tools. No, it's not hard. No, you don't need lots of muscles. No, it's not dangerous. And at the Center for Art and Wood, with Old City Fest, when that began, I did demonstrations out on the street. And, we would usually pair up with people. I think Derek Weidman and I did it a couple times paired up. And when he was turning, well, everyone was looking, but lots of men, and the women were standing back. And then as soon as I started turning, the women and girls got closer and closer and closer and started asking questions. And that's when I really understood that that element of my work is really important. That element of work needs to be done, because if you're not out there and if people don't see it being done, then they don't believe it's possible. They don't even think about whether it's possible or not.
Mm.
That's sad to hear that it's even today.
Yeah, it is.
But it reminds me, Suzanne, what you're saying, that the importance and the impact of the visual experience of seeing a woman involved in this act and this practice reminds me of something that Wendy Maruyama said a long time ago about the importance of her first woodworking instructor being a woman. And then Kim, a student of Wendy's, you also said the same thing in some written correspondence that we had a year ago, talking about women and woodworking. So that's, I mean, apparently it's a proven fact that this is what needs to be seen. You need to see somebody that looks like you engaged in the act, sometimes in order to take you from the step of being interested and compelled into it to actually having the courage to move forward and grasp that opportunity to get involved in it.
In 1990, I was hired by the Wooden Boat School in Maine to teach a basic fundamental woodworking class for women. And they wanted that class because they were finding that they wanted to expand their students, and they thought, well, there's a lot of women out there who might be able to take boat building classes, but they don't know woodworking. That first year, it was just a week-long class. I had 12 women. I went into the experience really not believing that it was important for a woman to teach a class or to have a class for women only. And after the first day, I realized it really was important, because every one of these 12 women said we wouldn't be here if a man were teaching the class. And the exciting part was the last day when they all said, we could now take it from a man, a woodworking class. That's still the case, sadly, but true. There are a lot of women who are intimidated by taking a class from a man, or even in a workshop setting where they would take a class from a woman. So it's still needed today. I'm sad that it is. So we do benefit from being role models.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was going to say, I taught it all with Lynette Breton back in the early 1980s. We taught an all-woman class. And I was also teaching a furniture design class, which was open to everyone. And the guys started complaining that they wanted to take the woodworking class, and that they're afraid of the machines also, and they don't know how to use them. And why don't we open it up? And so we did have a discussion, and I think we opened it up, but it did change the nature of the class. But I also think, I used to think California was a little bit different than part of the rest of the country. Like when I first moved to Northern California, I kept hearing that Wendy Moriyama and Gail Friedel were the first two women at RIT in a graduate program. Well, my graduate program at Cal State Northridge for a whole year, 2 full semesters, were solely women. There weren't any guys in the graduate group. And I thought, what's wrong with them back east? We're way ahead. We even got the vote before, the women got the vote before the bill was passed 100 years ago. They were already voting out in California.
Well, and what's interesting, what we're talking about is how women learning a new skill, like to an intimidating skill, a traditionally male skill, prefer to learn first from a woman. But at the same time, the presence of men in those situations and seeing that dynamic occur, I truly believe advances their creativity and their ability to fully contribute. You know, I'm always very worried when we talk about, you know, men and women. We have been institutionally separated on so many levels for so long that we need to create atmospheres that are welcoming for all genders, for all ables, for all cultures, for all everything, because we all learn from each other. I was in a workshop once, and I was the only woman, and we go through of furniture making, and these two gentlemen came up about the 5th day, and they said, I gotta tell you, when we heard there was going to be a girl in the class, we were kind of bummed out. But you helped us more than anyone in here, and we really enjoyed having you in the class. So, you know, our presence is important not only to other women, but to everyone.
I think that's an important statement to make. I was also, when you were describing or responding to the first question about how you initially became connected to the field, I was thinking, you know, it's all through education, through higher education in most cases, or self-guided education as an adult. And I was thinking, you know, if this were traditionally or categorically, I'm making an enormous generalization here, but I feel like if we had 4 men speaking here on this panel, it would have been, well, you know, I was in my father's workshop as soon as I could stand, and then I took classes in middle school and woodshop classes in high school, and then I just kept going. So it's really interesting to me that almost all of you not only discovered or ran into it through higher education, but also the other thing that you mentioned that kept you in the field was more often than not collegiality, whether that comes from being a part of an organization like AAW, or having opportunity to be involved and learn more in residencies that are collaborative, like the Center's Wingate International Turning Exchange. So it was not lost on me that the you know, the part of the appeal was being a part of a society, and discourse that comes from that.
Yeah, I think related to what you just said and what was just the topic that was just discussed, and you know, I'm in a very fortunate position, especially when I started my woodworking education. I didn't plan on learning woodworking in the same way I didn't plan on learning wood turning. I went to graduate school in San Diego for ceramics, and then I was introduced to Wendy, and it all changed from there. And so I was just willing to take a risk, and it's worked out well for me. But I will say that, you know, that I was in a very fortunate position because I have, you know, I'm there in graduate school, late 90s, early 2000s, and we have people like Wendy, we have people like Gail, we have people like Roseanne Summerston, Judy McKee, Merryll, who have already like paved the way for me to be able to do this without having to explain or overly justify my gender and my abilities within this material. And I think that Wendy fostered an environment that was very encouraging of women. Half of my peers in the graduate program were women, and so, you know, we held our own, you know, and that was really exciting. And there was this wonderful sense of community, going back to what you're talking about, that was both encouraging but also incredibly challenging, that pushed us forward, you know, with our work, with our technical understanding, and And that community is super important. And I think that's one thing that I've been quite impressed by with like the WIT group is how encouraging they are of one another and to create opportunities to support each other and to continue to grow the community. I also think it's important as an individual maker, and I think, you know, I would advocate for any maker to do this, is to put yourself out there and show up, like just show up and become part of the community. You know, like you can't affect change unless you participate. And so, you know, it can be a little intimidating. And also, I think it's important for you as an artist and as to expand your ideas and experiences through unfamiliarity as well. And so that may be, in this case, joining a co-op shop that is not just for women, or it may be going to do a residency outside of your normal medium or comfort zone. I think through those experiences, you learn a lot about yourself, which in the end is quite empowering.
Thank you.
And that's all within the community of art and also academia. I think it was Katie Hanel who told me that most of her students, the majority of the students now, are young women who are coming into the furniture making programs. And I think that that has changed so much for the good in terms of having women in the program. Where I don't see quite the progress is in the wood turning field itself, in the local clubs. It's beginning to change, but it still hasn't hit that mark that the academic programs have.
I was going to say that was my problem in the beginning, was the furniture field. Even then, this is, you know, I graduated in the 70s, and when I first moved north, I contacted Wendy Moriyama and Gail Friedel because there were two women in furniture, and they were very open. Roseanne Summerson, all these people were extremely welcoming. And then I was in a group shop, and they suggested I started turning more practical things so I could make some money. You know, I could sell them at a craft show. They suggested I go to a wood turning event, which was at Provo, Utah. And I think I met Albert around that time, Albert Lakoff. And the wood turning world was not open in the same way. One, because I didn't know what tools they were using. I didn't know the names of them. I didn't know a gouge from a scraper, and I didn't care. I went to art school, who cared? And so I always felt like like Betty was saying, the academia world was much more open to, there wasn't the kind of male women roles in the same way. And I found wood turning was much more closed, and it was much more male oriented, and they would all get together and help each other. But it did not include there were only a couple of us women. Michelle Holtzapfel was there, Addie Draper, and I was probably one of the first in Michelle. We were never included in the kind of events that they had. It was really guy oriented.
So I think
Betty was the one.
That.
What?
Yeah. We're beginning to change that with the women in turning, because what we're doing is creating our own community now. And because of that, that's drawing more and more women. And I know there was this big question about women in turning within the AEW of whether or not it was legitimate to have a little group that was just dedicated to women. I feel the same way about that as I do about the general field. I think it's important, I think it's needed, and I'll be really glad when it's not needed, but right now it is. And so those are the kinds of things we can do. And I knew, Suzanne, when you did your work with the PALs, I believe you had mostly girls in that. That's the sort of thing we can connect with. And what else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, we're having some consensus on the idea that in higher education, there's more parity, where I am working, where my studio is a very, very fragile neighborhood. And, you know, higher education, we're hoping that people get through high school. So the ability to open doors and sort of serve as an instigator, like I try not to be a teacher. I try to put tools in front of people and show them safely what to do and say, okay, now go. And with this past experience with women in turning and seeing how adult women respond to being taught by women, giving opportunity cannot be limited to these levels of privilege where we're just missing out too much on the creative input of too many of the people that we live with.
I agree with that. And I do think that's one of the ways in which the Center for Art and Wood has excelled, is I think it's taken an active stance in trying to create inclusivity and accessibility to a wider swath of our population. I think the challenge with our material is it's so machine reliant. You know, there are things we can do that aren't on the lathe, obviously, but it is so machine reliant. I had the good fortune recently to participate in a STEAM program with 7th graders. They were in the Delta region of Alabama, and it was a design and architecture program. And so I designed this shelf unit and a little house shape. You know, I sent off all the specs, the working drawing, and they hired a carpenter to cut the parts. So it was all done through Zoom, and the girls didn't get to actually cut the material, but it was still so wonderful to see how proud they were just in the assembly stage. And, you know, the challenge I was given is a wood project that uses only glue. And I'm thinking that doesn't work. And not in 2 hours, that just simply doesn't work. And I said, you know, how about nails, like pin nails and a hammer? And they didn't want to give the girls a hammer because they were afraid. And those girls were so excited about having their hammer. They held it up and showed it to me, and it was wonderful. So I think the more opportunities and the more creative brainstorming that we can engage to provide accessibility in such a way is super important for a number of reasons. One being the topic of our discussion tonight, which is empowering women, you know, and celebrating women and the voice and the power of women. But I think it goes beyond that, like what you were talking about a minute ago, Suzanne, just the community that we need to invite. And that's everybody, abled, age, you know, how they identify, everybody. And I think that we can do that with some creative problem solving and help in the resource department.
I suggested to the AAW years before that whatever city they go to have a group of volunteers to go a couple of days ahead of time and set up shop right in front of the convention center or wherever they're allowed to demonstrate, to have people make pens, to get the community involved in some way, because, you know, just the same as academia sort of is benefiting from having so many women participate now, I think we could do that within the AAW and within our wood turning community by the outreach that we can do during the symposium, and not just for the people who are there at the symposium, because we're all pretty privileged to be there.
I will say that was one thing I love about the recent virtual symposium is how much more accessible it was. You know, that people, I mean, it's expensive to go to the symposium, let's be honest. And that is not accessible to a lot of people. And so now suddenly with $20.20, you get to participate in some very meaningful content. And I would love it if the AAW, I'm challenging Greg Schramett because I see him in the audience, I'm challenging him now to try to make something like that happen, because I think it's super important to growing the field to a new audience. Because if you look at the demographics of the organization, we all know it is of a later generation. These are largely retired folks that have had, I presume, successful careers and have the means to do so. But then you're missing out on like this huge population of people that could add so much to the field and to the conversation.
Yeah, you know,
Sure.
Kim, when you were talking about the, you know, these wonderful machines, right? And I've been very challenged with how responsible, ethical is it for me to teach people how to use machines that they do not have the resources to have for themselves. Now, with the Center for Art and Wood, this move away from pure wood turning, when I was teaching the teenage girls, and I've seen this before, some of the girls, boy, they loved that lathe. They loved it like there was no tomorrow. Some of the other girls would prefer to do wood turning, wood burning, or wood carving, or painting. So I'm trying to embrace the idea of wood turning really is just an example of using material that can be translated in a lot of different ways. I think if we talk purely about wood turning, it is hard because it is very expensive and it's out of reach for a lot of people.
Right.
So
I was go ahead, Merrill, and then I want to throw out another question out there.
okay, so I was going to say yeah, go ahead.
No, after you.
I was going to say I moved from Berkeley to a fairly small town, and there's a very active art association. And I'm on the board, and one of the reasons they wanted me on the board was that I could bring in some new ideas. So I had this grandiose plan because the local library has been doing monthly children art events, and it brings a lot of people to the library. It's very active on a Friday night. So I was going to try to get the wood turning groups together with the art groups. Like they've done some things where the kids painted a mural and they had so much fun. Then they did individual pieces of fabrics that became a large quilt. And I thought if I could get the two groups, the wood guys who stay away from the painting group and the painting group, get their help, that we could do some small carving event, something to get a new generation interested in some of these materials, other than just, because some people aren't interested in painting a picture of trees. But then COVID came along, and that's sort of the end of that for the moment, at any rate.
Well, I want to get to that, Merrill, but
Yeah.
before I do, I do want to talk about something that we haven't discussed yet, and that is the fine art world. Each of you, while also being educators and writers, has also had interaction with the gallery world and the creation of artworks, and which necessitates the display of said artworks in the museum or gallery environment, and then the connection with selling or having institutions collect and then shepherd and guide the thinking and research and scholarship on those pieces. So I wanted to ask each of you, if compelled, to talk about your experience in that world, and which is not necessarily the same thing as production wood turning, but to be wood turning artists in the art world and moving around that kind of environment, and what that's been like for you, and what kind of apropos empowerment, whether that's more empowering or it has been as an experience, or less, and what should change in terms of access not only to wood turning artists, but also to people who want to participate in the viewing and the understanding and reading about and access to aesthetic experiences afforded by the display of these artworks.
Yeah. Well, it pays the bills. It may get me a Wikipedia page someday. I have work in 20 some museums, but what really drives my life are the connections that I have. And I don't know what to do about that in a way. I like the notoriety. I like that I've made a living by selling my work. But I don't think that that's what I want to have be my legacy. I want friendships and connections. So yes, it's great. We need them. We don't have the galleries anymore. Museums are still not collecting the work of woodturners or women in parity with men. Women still don't get the same prices for their work, and sometimes that's their own fault because they're not holding out for what prices they ought to put on them. So I'm really conflicted with that topic. So
Yeah, it's not meant to be all good. It's a challenge no matter how you look at it.
I feel like one of those people who say, I just like to make things. You know?
Yeah.
That's not good enough for this discussion. I'm not going to let you get away with that this time, Merrill.
Now here's one.
Yeah.
The structures that are in place now in order to submit work and enter, it requires technology that not only you have access to, but that you know how to use. It takes money for the entrance fees. It takes writing ability, so there are language proficiencies that are required. And even as an educated person, it is a huge bummer to have to sit there and put those things together. So once again, then I look at myself and say, but hey, I have it all. What can we do for artists that, how can we mentor or facilitate their entree into these fields? I think that's far more important and worthwhile. You reach a certain point when you're like, yeah, this is great and I'm doing this, or I've made something that I really want people to see. I know how to get that seen if I really want it to be seen. But there are people making some wonderful work that's worth discussing. And we need to facilitate that process. So it's not so exclusive, because it's a barrier and it doesn't have to be there.
So I agree. I think, to just piggyback on some of that, we are talking about, it is an expensive endeavor. And in addition, like if you have an emerging artist, you have to have proper photography, and that's expensive, that's challenging. So you may have an individual who makes really wonderful work that is completely innovative, but if their photography is subpar, their results are subpar, in terms of acceptance into some of these venues that we're referring to. I do think, I think that here in Tennessee, the Tennessee Arts Commission and Tennessee Craft have a really good mentorship program that pairs a master artist and an apprentice. And I think that that's a nice way outside of academia to share that knowledge. Additionally, I'm a member of a regional chapter of Tennessee Craft, and like just recently, we have a little innovation hub here in this town. And one of the things that they were doing is providing access to their photo studio for taking product photography and a chapter member was making themselves available to help. So I think creating more opportunities for that exchange is really important. I've been fortunate to participate in a lot of exhibitions, and most recently one that I think is one of the most rewarding and special ones to me is the Making a Seat at the Table exhibition that was hosted at the Center for Art and Wood. I think it was really great for a large group of people. It was
I was going to ask you if you have at CCA, do you know Mary Little at all?
I know who she is, yeah.
Anyway, Mary Little came from Ireland and studied at the Royal College of Art. And she and her husband were teaching an upholstery class in the furniture program in San Francisco. And Mary decided that she had to start a business class, an atelier, and where they had assignments, you know, in terms of marketing, in terms of photographing their work. And it was quite an amazing class because I remember when I first started, I think one of the first conferences I ever went to, I think it was Richard Raffin. And he said something about like, it's, you know, like we artists, you know, we better learn how to work faster because you're going to be spending 50% of your time at your desk, you know, promoting your work, getting word out, filling out application forms, entering shows. And then at some point I realized, God, I wish it was only 50%. Sometimes it's a lot more than that. And it does take work. And I know over the years, sometimes I know I get complaints from one of the guys in the local turning club, like, how come it's always the same people in a show? And I said to one guy, well, I'm sure they entered a lot of shows to get their name out there. They didn't just get invited off the street. You've got to get your work out there. And I offered to help him put a resume together. Do it, but he didn't want to do the work. It's like somehow it's supposed to happen, but it really does take work. You really have to put yourself out there, even if you don't want to, and it's not your nature. You have to somehow do it. Take that chance. That's what I've seen. Sometimes the best talent in the whole world won't get anywhere if they're not willing to put in the legwork.
Yeah, that's an important point, especially any kind of career requires some icky stuff too. It's not all.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I'm about to open this up to questioning, but I had two things that I wanted to throw out. First of all, I mentioned that I wanted to go back to social service and community action through craft, and namely wood turning. And Merrill, you mentioned that, and a couple of ways that could be enacted. And then Suzanne, you have actually done this recently, as you mentioned, with your work, the project with the Police Athletic League. And I wondered if you could throw out some more thoughts or maybe reflect on these experiences and how perhaps we could all be more active in the community, or you know, wood turners could use that as a way to create also more acquaintance with the field.
So I had a residency in 1990 and went to work in England. And one of the things I found with the local turners they really saved my life. I was out in the middle of a mountain area, and they were very welcoming. But one of the things that the turners there did that I never saw in the States was they almost had two lines of work that they called domestic, like Ray Key used to talk about his domestic wear and his gallery work.
Mhm.
And I used to feel like, I'll go backtrack. When I was in grad school, every semester we had to do a bread and butter item. We had 2 or 3 weeks to design. They gave us something to design. You know, it had to be, I don't know, I did a magazine rack, I did a fold-up table, just a variety of projects. We had 2 weeks in which we designed, did the drawings, made this product and presented it. And then they said we could go off and be our little artists doing our one piece for the rest of the semester, which is what some of us did. Because the idea was in the olden days that the bread and butter item is what paid your overhead, paid your rent. You had to have a product that kept you going. And the art pieces don't always do that for you. And so I remember I gave a talk once to a local high school that had a lot of immigrant kids. They wanted to bring in people in various careers. And I felt like what Suzanne is doing, that is that if people did do bread and butter items or did small domestic items, that there's a market for it. People love handmade things. And it doesn't all have to be high-end art, but that never seemed to quite be what American woodturners were interested in doing. Like Ray Key did tons and tons of breadboards. It used to amaze me how much he did of that kind of work. And then he did his beautiful, elegant bowls too. So I feel like there's a place for that in our community. And the other one, I thought about this today, is there's not very many people of color in crafts particularly. Like, why is that? Is it just that it's so expensive to do crafts? I don't know.
I think, Merrill, I'm glad that you brought that up because we were going to get there, but you launched us in that direction. And I think this also connects the previous question in terms of what Suzanne has been doing.
Right.
I think we already answered that question in a way that, you know, I think we established during this conversation that we agree that different voices is a benefit to the field, right? And
Yes.
not a disadvantage. And B, that it's much easier to enter a field if you have no previous experience with it, if there's someone who looks like you, who is leading it and educating it. So I think that's what we're missing. But Suzanne, you can correct me if I'm...
Yeah, I mean, I am in a unique position because I put myself in a unique position. I am in a very inner city location. It is actually very multicultural, multiracial, but I am not in the suburbs. I am right in the thick of things. And when I established my studio there and I looked out the window, I was just like, wow, the whole world is out here. And all I have to do is open my door and pick up the phone and pick up the phone again and invite people in. And again, not centering myself as in, we're going to make a plate, we're going to make a bowl, we're going to make a pen. I'm inviting you in here so that you can play and experiment and see if it does anything for you, see if it helps you. And I'll talk about how for me it's very soothing, it's very meditative, it's very therapeutic. So when I work with kids, you know, kids are on screens, and in COVID, for heaven's sakes, I mean, that part of my practice is on hold, which is really sad. But it's giving them a different way for them to channel their energy and to try to understand who they are. I just started working with workforce development. company, a nonprofit, people who have been incarcerated, people who are housing insecure, people going through substance abuse treatment. Opening the door and saying, this is all for you to use. Let's figure out the best ways you can get what you want from it. The decentering, the walking away from the traditional hierarchy of, I am the teacher, you are the student. That's really, I have seen time and time again, it's very important to step back from that model. It just perpetuates the inequity.
I think a lot of what you have done, Suzanne, is just basic empowerment. Giving a young person a hammer and letting them hammer nails. They don't have to make anything.
I do think that it is very sad to see the lack of diversity in the craft field. I will, however, say I do think that there are institutions and collectives that are taking the lead on that and trying to affect change. An example is Crafting the Futures, which was organized by a group of artists based at Penland, and they've done remarkable things. And they have then reached out and partnered with other workshop institutions such as Penland, Haystack, Aramont, to create matching workshop opportunities for people of color. And I think, you know, if we can all try to accept that challenge and responsibility, I think, you know, over time, we're going to see a lot more diversity in the field.
Yeah, so it's a commitment to band together for programming and develop ethical programming. And then also to push on the funders to look outside of the traditional giving check writing. The other thing too, I mean, I do believe this extends to our institutions, and I did want to talk about volunteerism a little bit. You know, and we're all volunteers, and we love the Center for Art and Wood, and we want this to work. But then on all levels of volunteerism, there has to be some kind of compensation for volunteers. If our volunteers that we're calling on again and again, and we love them and they're wonderful, but they enjoy the resources of time, transportation, dollars that allow them to do that volunteering. And that becomes some of the part of the institutional culture that when people come into an institution, they see the people who have the privilege of money, transportation, and time. So if we can find a way at the very base level to bring people into what we're doing every day somehow, then that's the story that we see. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people that would have interesting and incredibly valid and valuable perspectives to bring to the conversation. But oftentimes, there's not the resources to get them there physically to make that happen. So if we're committed to making that conversation happen, and we're committed to hearing that person, we need to follow through by providing the support to get them there. Either that's through physical transportation and lodging, or seeking alternative methods for having a conversation such as this. But I do think that that is a really important thing to recognize, is just the resource barrier.
Yeah. There's that takes us, I think I'm gonna throw out the last question here, and then we'll open it up to comments. We are going way, with your forgiveness, we're going way over our time, but I I'm having a great time, and I hope everyone else is. So thank you for our guests for sticking around for a few extra minutes. And when you get tired, let me know. That really leads me to this last question here. It's impossible, I think, to have any conversation about the state of something, the state of things in the here and now, without talking about what's been happening the last 6 months and what we've all gone through worldwide as a global society in the last 6 months. I mean, a pandemic, an economic crisis resulting from that, a shift in education, pedagogic practices, experience for students as well as instructors, identifying people who are at risk in particular ways because of their jobs or because of their race, or because of their economic situation, the cancellation, when we're talking about artists specifically, or particularly artists in the craft field, we're talking about cancellation of shows and selling shows and conferences around which they plan their year and their budgets. And also a pivotal racial justice movement that has forced our society as a whole, importantly, to open its eyes and confront systemic inequalities and biases on a personal level and on an institutional level. So I would love to hear from each of you how the last 6 months has impacted you and your work on an individual and also on an occupational level. I know that's a lot of variables in one list, and I think that whatever we're doing in our lives, we certainly we each have our own response to that question.
Well, I can make this pretty brief. My life really hasn't changed that much. I live alone. I'm retired. I get my Social Security check. My house is paid for. So I just have no complaints. My son's dog is staying with me right now, so I have dog company. The one thing that has changed a little bit is the lack of opportunities to exhibit and show and discuss my work. Mm-hmm. So that has caused me to be to feel a little bit of a lack of enthusiasm for being out in my shop.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So that's actually impacted your energy towards producing or getting even the motivation to be involved in the process.
Yes, but it also could because I'm getting older. I'm just not as interested in, I don't know, being out there. I've stopped before this happened, I stopped doing any sort of in-person demonstration. So I'd already withdrawn a lot.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was scheduled to teach. So, my life basically revolves around the academic calendar. And so when, during the summer, always try to schedule things like workshops, collaborations, etc. And so, I was scheduled to teach at Aramont at Port Townsend School of Woodworking, do a series of demos in Delaware and Asheville, where Greg is, go to Emma Lake in Canada, and it's all changed. So it's been an adjustment, but it is actually kind of good for me because I was able to make time to make myself a table, which I never make something just for myself. But that's what I've been doing, and it's been nice. And I got a dog. So
you can't let that go without talking about the dog.
He's so cute.
Yeah, I've become more domestic. I bake bread, I've made ice cream, I found familyhandyman.com, which is helping me plan how to sort out some unfinished areas. But I'm not really going out in the shop and making art. And then I have a closet full of art, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this stuff? There's this feeling like I already have a lot of stuff. Do I want to make more? But my community has done one nice thing. They gave they had a competition. You submitted an idea to decorate an Adirondack chair. And so they call them Artirondacks. And they're sitting down on the main drag. People use them constantly. They're going to be out there through October when it will be too cold, I guess. And then they're going to raffle them off. No money involved for residents. You just get yourself a ticket. And that really got me motivated. I worked for 2 weeks solid, but I also realized how old I am, because first of all, it took me 2 weeks for this one project. I would fall into bed at night exhausted. And then where I used to be one good night's sleep, I could recover. This took 2 full days and 2 or 3 nights of sleep before I felt like I could move again after carving and painting this chair. Oh, well, you know. And I'm growing tomatoes and fighting the squirrels. That's what I'm doing with my time. So it is a strange time. It's the local art organization is trying to do things, but I am not up to snuff to help them, with technology. I'm a good idea person, but that's not my forte. And that's what they need right now, to be able to have Zoom meetings and demos for members. But yeah, isn't that what everybody else is doing also, really? Just,
I will say, yeah, like the whole remote interactive demo, I haven't spent the time to figure that out. And I think maybe it's just some Zoom exhaustion, like so much of my professional life lately revolves around this. And it's like, I just don't know that I have the bandwidth right now to tackle that. But there are these wonderful opportunities that are coming up now as a result. So, I will do it. It's just right now, I just haven't really had the bandwidth to deal with it. But I do think it's wonderful to see that those interactive remote demos are happening.
yeah, I'm doing an online drawing class from the University of North Kentucky.
Ah.
It's really comprehensive class. So I've been trying to, lessons are like 2 hours long. So I'm trying to do that on a regular basis. It's really exciting for me.
I took a chip carving class, a chip carving workshop. It was just like 3 hours long, and then making zines, because I thought that would be a fun project in a drawing class.
Right, it would.
I'm very, from the curatorial side of things, I actually have to say that I'm really, really curious to see what kind of artwork comes out of this period of isolation, and in many cases a lack of access to the kind of tools and materials that artists in this field are generally dependent on, and also forced isolation in many cases, and sometimes this can lead to intense turning points in creativity and innovation. So this is something that I'm looking forward to as a silver lining, because we should always end on a silver lining, right? Well, thank you, everyone. I think we could go on all night, but I do want to open this up to questions, and there have been a few coming up in the chat, and I'm going to start. Sorry, I'm going to start with one from Leah Woods. Hi, Leah. I'm curious what all the guests think about the effect of men seeing a woman being the woodworking or wood turning teacher. So flipping it around, how I think, Leah, if I'm not mistaken, this is actually a question for the men here tonight. Do people see it as important as women teaching women, men seeing women be powerful and knowledgeable? Oh, no, I think women can answer this question too. So is that also of importance, having men in a class who are learning a skill being guided by a woman instructor? Is that something critical that could possibly change things?
I think for me, because I do workshops and teaching and turning Tuesdays, and people sign up and they come, and they check my website and they know I'm a girl, right? So by the time they come to the studio, there's a comfort level already. So the guys that come into Dovetail Wood Arts, you know, they're ready to go, and they could care less what my gender is. You know, they're ready to go. And, you know, a lot of times I think the men enjoy being in that situation because they can ask questions that they might not get a straight answer in a room full of guys. The bravado, the ego, they just want to know how to sharpen their tool. And it's like, okay, this is how you do it. Or, oh, you're having trouble with this part of the technique. Oh, try this and try that. And, you know, maybe they have a little bit of a softer landing and a more opportunity to learn what they're after without that level of competition that can occur in all male groups.
I know that I had trouble with building my shop here in a new town where I felt like Berkeley, they were already used to all of us. You know, there's so many women workers, artists. And I think my age also, the fact that I really have a wood shop and I have professional machines, and it was very hard to convince the electrician that I really do want a separate breaker on each one of my machines. And that's what they require. Or that I had my bandsaw in pieces because it had been in storage and I wanted to clean up all the bearings and everything. And the contractor said, gosh, will you be able to put that back together? And I said, well, I think after 30, 40 years, I think I should be able to, you know. But so I find that that's a new thing, is my moving to a new town is my age and then my work. And that people cannot have a lot of trouble putting that together. And sometimes they think I'm really cute, you know, it can be annoying.
Mm-hmm. I think every woman has the experiences just by virtue of leaving your house. You're subject to certain kind of experiences wherever you are. I know I've been told to smile in 3 different languages by people that I don't know, so just as an example.
Right.
But particularly women in fields like, I did another panel some years ago when I was at the museum in Seattle, where I think it was like a special landmark year celebrating women in metals, and not contemporary jewelry and not metalsmithing, but actually, but like forging and blacksmithing. And there was a lot of conversation about this happened to me and that happened to me, this happened to me, that happened to me. These are the strategies that I have adopted when I am working at the forge in order to survive and then get what I need to get done in that environment. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of protective strategies that come up, whether that means performing masculine sometimes in order to assert yourself and get across what you need to get across, to using a certain kind of lingo or jargon. But that's always interesting to me that people always have the anecdotal, you know, the things that they say and how much they mesh together. I did want to, let's see, there was another question. Where did it go? Oh, I think we did talk about quite a bit about higher education or formal education, but there was another question about the lack of proportionality of higher education among women versus men, and I assume this is specific to wood turning. So are there additional comments that you'd like to make on that question?
I guess I'm not sure what's being asked.
Yeah.
I think how I interpret it is that, well, I'm just going to read it. You'll decide. I'll read word for word. It is my observation that many women in woodworking today have had a lot of formal education in the field, more than a lot of male makers. Can the panel address the value of this?
I think it's just because of the women who have had that higher education are the ones that are stepping out there and being seen. I don't think it's true in general.
But that's an important point, is who you see isn't necessarily who's working. And I think that also goes back to, you know, during the ACC conference, I led a panel in conjunction with the exhibition, Making a Seat at the Table. And one of the questions was really circulating around Linda Nochlin's seminal writing, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists? And so I twisted that, I misquoted it intentionally, and asked, why have there been no great women woodworkers? And part of her point, if you read her essay, isn't necessarily that there haven't been great women artists, it's that they haven't been written about, documented, presented, given the opportunities, or had access to the opportunities that it takes to become a great artist. And so I feel as someone on the other side of this field who watches developments take place and watches makers do what they do, I feel hopeful and optimistic that those conditions are changing and those restrictions are eroding. And I hope that they continue to do so.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Go for it, Merryll.
I was gonna say, I hope so too, especially when I think how long I've been doing this, that I just assume or hope that things are much easier. And I think certainly like WID is growing, this Women in Turning group is growing like crazy. I don't know what the numbers are at all.
Well, I wonder about that though, because you know, when you look at the community that of the, I guess as a taken as a whole, the chapter aspect of the society of wood turning in this country. It's physical, you know, it's sharing physical space together, and that's where those conversations and skills are transferred and exchanges are had. Whereas women in turning necessarily takes place in the social media world. So there's exchange and there's sharing, which I find incredible. And also the level of skill that you see in women in turning is really inspiring as well. But I wonder what are the opportunities that women in turning offers that being a part of a chapter wouldn't offer, and then also vice versa. What are the challenges of being a part of a group that's on social media versus in a physical space?
Well, I know like in Denver, there's the there's more than two clubs, but there's two clubs that I joined here in Colorado. And the group in Denver, the Front Range Woodturners, they were doing once a month Saturday classes for women only. And sometimes it was just members volunteering. And I thought it was very successful. And it was just this nice, quiet thing where they got to have special training. And I felt like there certainly were more women in that group, maybe because of that, or maybe just the population is bigger than there's one up that meets up near Fort Collins. And that's a much smaller group. So the Bay Area was very different, and there were quite a few women in the group. And I always felt, well, I just feel it's the Bay Area. It has a difference, you know, just that like there were so many women businesses of cabinet makers and furniture makers and craftspeople that you felt safe in that kind of a community. I hear stories from some of the women in turning that there's still so much where they feel really uncomfortable at club meetings. Betty might be able to speak more to that than I can.
Well, I think there are women who are still intimidated and really don't put themselves out there. But what you're seeing in the WIT group on the Facebook page doesn't really tell the story of. I think most of those women are connected to their local chapters, or to each other and learning, or to the, I don't know. I really think they are connected to the local chapters. A lot of them are officers in the local chapters.
Well, I think I'm going to open it up for those who want to stick around for a few more minutes. I'm going to open it up so you can definitely unmute yourselves and have at it. Well, I'll thank everybody when we close the meeting. But I do want to thank our panelists and also the Center for Art in Wood for creating a forum for this discussion. I think if we have learned anything, or if I have any takeaways from tonight, it's that we have a lot of work to do, but also a lot of work is being done. And what's most inspiring to me is women artists like yourselves, each in your own way and using your own capacity, have made significant, enormous change in the lives of many artists and students and future artists. So that's what we depend on that. So thank you to each of you for being who you are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for getting us all together. It's really.
I need an excuse to get you all together.
Zoom is helping quite a lot.
It is. I'm getting used to the squares. I inhabit a square. I don't exist. I've dematerialized myself, so this is all that exists anymore.
But you've had a couple of people that I would never have gotten a chance to see except for this online access. It just wouldn't have happened.
That's right. That's
and
right.
I feel very, very fortunate, you know.
That's right. It, this as Albert's here, and he founded this organization based on international events,
Right.
symposia, and so we're really reaching back. We've always had that mission, but reaching back to our roots and activating that. That's what this is allowing us to do, which is exciting for me. Having international conversations is where I'm most comfortable. So it's really amazing to be able to do that.
I think that you guys have been really great at seizing the opportunity that this era has presented, and that is this programming that we have tonight and then all of the other program. And it's provided really enriching and important conversation. So I just want to applaud you for being the artistic director and leading the programming and conversation, and all of the staff at the Center for Art and Wood to realize it. I know there's a lot of technical hoops to jump through and scheduling and organizing, and you all have done a really wonderful job. So congratulations.
Wow.
Yes, bravo.
Thank you, Kim. That's really nice. And yes, thank you to the entire staff and board of the center. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Well, it's always fun to, I see people on these things that, like, I wouldn't get a chance to.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very fortunate.
Well, if that reminds me something, Merrill, if Greg is still here, it feels like this year was really a turning point for the way that we hold conferences and opportunities for coming together and convening, and the way AAW did that this year seems like, I don't remember who mentioned specifically about providing more access to people to learn from and participate these events, but I assume that that's not going away. That's certainly not going away for us. We're going to continue, even if miracles happen and pandemics end and we're all free to, be as touchy as we want and share space together again, we will still be also occupying this space. Because as you mentioned, Merrill, it lets us do some things that we weren't able to do, by financial limitations and others.
Right.
Just the fact of geographical distance, not able to do some of these things, and now we can relatively comfortably. So, you know, with the occasional dog barking. Sorry for that. And so yeah, it's inspiring.
I just researched and wrote and had published an article for the August issue of the AAW Journal on virtual connections. And in the research, I'll send you a copy of it. On the research that I did, it was overwhelming that these kind of Zoom meetings are going to continue. They're going to get more professional, and there's lots of support for it. If anybody here wants to learn some things and has questions, there's a website called Lucid Woodturners. It's run by Alan Zenrich. He is the most fabulous sharing person, all things remote. He's got all kinds of articles posted on there and what kind of cameras to use, what kind of connections. It's way more than I could even imagine that I would ever need or want, but there is a lot of support out there. And if anybody wants a copy of that article, I'd be glad to share it with you. It has some points about how you set up your fee structure, the questions to ask for the local chapters or individuals that you're connecting with. Yeah, they're here to stay, even after the pandemic.
I will say it's so nice how convenient it is. You know, I was talking to a gentleman a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the symposium, and it's like, how wonderful is it that I can watch Cindy Drozda turn a finial box, bake cookies in my pajamas all at the same time. It was wonderful.
And text me.
And text Merryll. We had a running joke that every time the word negative rake scraper was mentioned, you had to take a shot.
I learned what it is finally.
And we get to see inside each other's homes, which is very exciting for me.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you can't see. I have your stool out, Kim.
Oh, good, good.
Nice. Oh, and it's so good to be able to see everyone also. I have a feeling that busts are going to come back in art. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of research of classical busts and emergence of that in our world. I know it's happening. I should probably plan that exhibition before get on that train before it happens. But it's certainly, you know, not only having the opportunity to have lectures, but also casual discussions has been really fun as well.
Right.
Because we certainly wouldn't
appreciate. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, we wouldn't fit in the center. You know, however many 50 people would not fit in the center for a sit down talk. So, you know, we're already ahead. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very, very grateful.
I love your woodshed also. The concept is great, and the title's clever.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and we would not have been able to do that without the staff behind it and pivoting so creatively and masterfully. It's been a really, really amazing thing to put together. We're really thrilled. Thank you for visiting also.
There's always something new on the woodshed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to check. Yeah.
Well, I think if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing this time with us today. I just feel empowered just by having this conversation. So thank you so much for being so generous and open with your personal and professional experiences. We have so much to learn from all of you, and we have learned a lot. And Merryll, I think I'm going to end this conversation by quoting Merryll. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was on the wall in the exhibition last year, and you've said it again in follow-up, and it's I don't remember how the beginning went, but it went, I'm going to be here doing my thing.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Just gotta keep. Yeah. I know when I started back at school, we used to, have these heady discussions like, how could Bob Stockstill or Sam Aloof make the same thing years and years and years? Like, we're not going to do that. We're the great art students. But here I am. And I'm still doing it. That's what it refers to. Yeah.
Keep doing your thing, Merryll,
Keep
please.
doing it. Yeah.
Please.
You have been an inspiration for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I want everyone to have a really wonderful night, and please keep in touch. We'll continue to have events, including tomorrow. We have a sip and whip, which is a kind of like a work in practice workshop, conversation, cocktail hour, very informal and very international. So that's something that we look forward to, and feel free to join us for that. And then we have some talks planned right up through the end of the year. So keep in touch, and thank you so much for attending. And a big round of applause for our illustrious panel. Amazing. Thank you, Betty, Suzanne,
Thank you.
Merryll, and Kim. Thank you so, so, so much. It's been an enormous pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Good
See you
Good
soon.
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.